Wednesday. Welcome back to Wisdom Wednesdays presented by Confuerza Experiences. Thank you for being here either live or watching us after. So grateful for your presence and your connection once again on this beautiful Wednesday. I am Manuela Contreras, your host, she, her, ella, and I am a Latina, caramel-skinned woman with my brown wavy hair today, wearing these beautiful earrings from this indigenous Colombian art form called Filindrina. I absolutely love this work. You can see them right under my my pink headphones, and I'm wearing my brown glasses, and I'm sitting behind a virtual cream background with the eucalyptus branch on my left and the Confuerza Experiences logo on my right. So thank you for being here. I'm excited for us to connect once again. Confuerza Experiences hosts these bi-weekly conversations called Wisdom Wednesdays to really encourage us to have nurturing conversations, to really challenge our way of how we exist currently in our workplace, so we can think differently about the work that we do and call us into living more sustainably, because I believe now more than ever, we need each other to do this incredible work, but we can only do this if we learn how to take care of ourselves along the way so we can continue to do this for a long time. So thank you for being here. We are now stepping into the spring season. March is wrapping up our winter reflective time, and now we're slowly starting to move into action. We have conferences coming up and events coming up, and for more reason, this is why it's so important for us to connect and really have these sincere conversations about how to prepare ourselves for this. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we'd love to bring in incredible guests, social justice leaders, social impact leaders, entrepreneurs, coaches, to all the range to bring in their perspectives. And today I have the privilege to bring Dr. Fatimah with us and Williams, and who is going to be here and sharing her wisdom. So I want to just call you into the room. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure. You've done a great job organizing us today.
Thank you. I always say organizing is my love language, so it's an honor.
That's great. Well, visual description of me. I'm a brown-skinned African-American woman with a short wavy afro, dark brown eyes, and a warm smile. I happen to be wearing pink lipstick today, and I'm in a floral shirt just to celebrate that it's spring and the sun is shining and it's beautiful out. I'm sitting in front of my coveted book collection. So there's some bookshelves behind me, and some of my favorite pieces of artwork, pencil drawn artwork of a landscape in Amsterdam and some other artwork behind me, and a small plant.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Fatima. I'm so glad you're with us today. And we're going to get into the conversation shortly. But before we start our conversation, I always love grounding all of us in a somatic practice. For those of you that are new to this work, somatic practices are a practice to not only connect ourselves to our mind, but to our body. Our body is rich of information that is always wanting to communicate with us. And in this practice of starting to preserve our well-being and learn how to live more sustainably, it's a really beautiful way to start listening to our body and what it's sharing, because we'll learn, as we talked about last week, when it comes to burnout, our body's been trying to tell us this way longer than our mind may be able to. So we're just going to take a moment to get settled into our body. Today, we're going to do a really simple somatic practice that you can bring back into your personal routine or out to your team, and encourage to really ground yourself before jumping into another meeting, conversation, or even project, whatever you're working on. So just take a moment to get grounded in your seat. If you have the ability to place your feet firmly on the ground, if you're not driving, safely close your eyes and take a deep breath. We're going to take a deep breath in through our nose, and I like to imagine a mountain. So with our breath going in through our mouth, in through our nose, imagine the breath going up the mountain, holding ourselves at the peak of the mountain, standing strong. And then imagine yourself with your breath flowing down the mountain, out through your mouth, slowly and deeply. Once again, taking a deep breath in through your nose, going up the mountain. Imagine that breath deep, strong all the way. Holding it there for just a second. And slowly start to release. Imagine yourself sliding down the mountain as you release through your mouth. And one last time, taking a deep breath in through your nose. Deep, deep, all the way into your belly. Holding it there. Taking a moment to notice your body. And then slowly start to release out through your mouth. And with that final breath, take a moment to just acknowledge your body for just a moment. Notice how it feels, where there's any tension, giving a little bit of love and attention and movement to that area. If it's your neck, maybe moving your neck around slightly. If it's your shoulders, pulling your shoulders up and out. Yes, if it's your hands, your wrists, all that typing every day, working on those big important projects, giving it a few rotations around your wrists, your legs that carry our body and all our wisdom every day, allowing a little bit of a shake throughout our body, a little bit of a movement. Feel that intuitive movement and allow yourself to just be and exist. Beautiful. Focus back in on those gentle breaths, and then you're going to take a moment to just bow your head, bow to yourself, honor yourself, and then slowly start to flicker your eyes open so you're the first thing you see when you join us back into this space. Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me in that practice as well. I hope that was supportive. Just a very simple breath. It can change your whole day or your whole energy going in. If you know you have an important meeting or you're entering a really difficult conversation, just taking a collective breath together, ground the space, and share your intention can really shape and shift how you can approach a conversation or a topic. Alrighty, well, let's get started then. We have a lot to cover and always richness to hear. But today we really wanted to have a conversation about leading through change. So Dr. Fatimah and I had the privilege of connecting because we are both co-speaking in an Ask Me Anything session at Peak 2025. So for those of you listening that are joining in and coming to Peak 2025 in New Orleans at the end of this month, I believe March 24th, right? That is the day where we're going to be able to connect and share what it means to navigate these life and career transitions. And so today we're going to continue to connect on this topic and start us off. We both share a passion for not only supporting people through leadership, but also how to do this sustainably. So I'm super excited for us to connect today and start this conversation. I want to invite you and Dr. Fatimah to share first about a bit about your alignment to this conversation. As I shared, we share this connection to it. So where did that passion start? Why did you feel aligned to doing this work?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I will say, I'm an executive coach and leadership development strategist. I've done this for the past 12 or so years. And so I've had the opportunity to work with everyone, let's say demographically, from PhD researchers in intensive research settings at universities, all the way through middle and senior level professionals, executive suite as well. And what I notice is we have very bright people who understand their content area, right? So they know the skill of their area, they know the content, they're, for all intents and purposes, experts in the work that they do. However, when we start to move through increasing managerial and leadership responsibilities, they can be destabilized, right? Destabilized. And so I really wanted to see, how can we pull in the skills as well as strategies to be able to manage not just the doing of the work, but then the sort of meta skill of leadership in a
Mm.
way that is more sustainable for the individual. And I'll say this, I find that a lot of, because I tend to work with people who might be considered high achieving, they're very much like you're give it 110% at every project, everything, and not realizing that management and leadership requires a different type of pacing and a different skill. And so I wanted to help people to have those skills to manage themselves, so they're knowing how to, where to put the weight of their work, right? To shift that weight now from the doing to the managing and leading, and having the skills to do that. And why was that important? Honestly, because I would see really smart people, bright people getting burned out, feeling resentful about work, resentful about colleagues, feeling like they signed up to do a job, but then the job that they're actually doing is not meeting their expectations. And often that's because of this, a bit of this conflict around knowing how to move through the ranks of the work and the skills to do so. So they know how to shift what is important and what is now less important, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That harmony, I call it. A
Mhm.
lot of folks, especially when we start thinking about how to preserve ourselves, how to take care of ourselves, we always talk about balance, and everyone's constantly in this
Mm.
balance. But I've loved what has supported me is the shift towards harmony, where
Mhm.
this balance, we do not need to always have a balance, because it's unrealistic. It's never going to
Yeah.
be 50-50. It's never going to be perfect. And so when we can have this harmony of it, allowing ourselves to flow in each area, it is so, so important. And it's powerful. It gives you a bit of that of grace to know that, oh, it doesn't
Mhm.
always need to be 120% or 100 here, 100 there, 100 everywhere. I love that you call this into that. And you said something really powerful here, is that when you start moving up into leadership, the skill sets are very different. This
Yes.
idea of being 100% is going to look very, very different. Do you mind going a
Mhm.
little deeper into that? Why do you think it's important for that to be different?
Yeah, so, you start to move from being the implementer or the individual contributor, as may be called. And now your view is maybe you have people that you are managing, whether it's a full team or just a few people. You may have more responsibility for managing larger scale projects and initiatives. And so it requires a bit more of the visionary thinking, the strategic thinking, less emphasis on the doing. And I'm not suggesting that you all of a sudden stop doing the work, right? But more of the weight then needs your strategic eye to say, we know that you know how to do this work really well. Now we need your strategic insight on how can we apply what you know to do this at a different scale, or to do this in a different way, or to teach and train others or mentor others in how to do it. And so those activities of that teaching, mentoring, coaching,
Mm.
at work, the time it takes to not only get ahead of your own schedule, but kind of look out over your projects and the life cycle of your project and be able to chart a way forward. All of those things take additional time. It takes additional energy, but it also really requires additional skill. And I'm really driving that home,
Mhm.
because working with people who are very talented, smart, high achieving people, you can feel like, well, I should just know how to do this. And
Mm.
that is not so. That is not so. You don't just know how to be a leader. You may have some gifting in the area of leadership, and you certainly may have some natural tendencies toward leadership, but there's a reason why this is a whole discipline and a whole field, because there are strategies, techniques that will help to just clarify, illuminate, give you some tools that will help to make things a little bit lighter. And so I'll give you an example, actually. I recently held one of our masterminds. We worked through one of my core texts for emerging leaders. And I like to say that, emerging, because even if you've been in a leadership role for a long time, you may still be emerging, right?
Mm.
A leader and sharpening your skills. And, as we got through the 6-week program, We're midway through, and I'm taking reflections from the group. Now, these are people who either run their own small businesses, have teams, 20 people or more. They're executive director of a center at a major university. They're not new to leadership, but the light bulb moment came on because they said, I realized that some of the struggles I had before I even got into this role was because I didn't know what I didn't know. Right, so I
Mm,
didn't know that there's ways that we can project manage our work or organize it more systematically that actually help to alleviate communication between me and my team. I didn't know that there's ways that I can coach my mentees or colleagues in a way that helps us to alleviate conflict or to clarify the work we're doing. And what happens on the other side of this is when we are kind of bumbling through it and kind of making it up as we go along, or worse yet, relying on tools that we've seen other people use that may or may not work well,
mm,
we don't have a foundational skill set to pull from. Right. And so
mm,
that's a lot of times where we're spending a lot of energy, a lot of effort, frustration, loss of confidence because we just don't have a quick tool to pick up, a quick
mm,
framework to pick up, a quick coaching question to pick up that helps to work through some of the challenging points of management and leadership. And so I'm not suggesting that everyone else need a PhD like I have in human behavior research and science, but there are some really key, simple things that can help with project management, time management, people support, that helps to alleviate some of this, what ends up looking like burnout, resentment, and challenge.
wow, wow. So, so powerful. And that is, what I'm hearing you talk about is allowing yourself to receive support.
Mhm.
And that so many times a lot of folks, we share this in common, this high achiever that we're talking about. Many of the demographics with high achievers are folks that are first gen, are folks that
Mhm.
are maybe, and when I say first gen, let me clarify, it is the
Mhm.
first time you're doing anything. It does not mean that you're just the first time immigrating to this country, or you're the first one after your parents immigrated to this country. You could be the first one in a corporate office. You could be the
Yes.
first one managing a team in your circle, in your community. When we
Mhm.
say first gen, it's you don't have the community around you that can maybe share, or you can see mentors in that space. And so
Yes.
what does that happen? Many times, to your point, we're having to figuring it out on our own. And what I love
Mhm.
that you're calling us in to think about is, one, we don't have to do it alone. But
Yeah.
two, it's okay that you don't know. It's
Yes.
how many times have we seen that job description where they say, and the research has shown, right, that if a man is looking at it, specifically a white man that's looking at it, they feel like 30% of it is enough, they'll go and apply. But us as women of color will look at it and we feel like we need to have every single thing right. But as people on the other side who have written job descriptions and have helped hire people, there is not an expectation for you to have it all figured out, but that you can showcase that there's a space to grow. There's a space to
Yeah.
evolve into that position.
And I would say that's where organizations come in, right? Is to provide that support. So some of why people don't realize and professionals don't realize that they can have support is because they've likely, again, not had that mentorship. They're not steeped in the literature like we are. They're not reading all the leadership books and, Harvard Business Review and Social Science Innovation Review. They're not reading all that stuff, right? So it's a natural blind spot. You wouldn't know if you're not really into that material. And so the not knowing is not a fault. It's actually just a symbol of growth that you've moved up, you've elevated to a new position or a new seat, and now there's some new things you can learn. But the importance or the emphasis of that learning should not be just with the individual and the professional, right?
Mhm.
So this is one of the things I talk about often. Unfortunately, at workplaces will really need talent to kind of move up, right? So maybe you've been that individual contributor and now there's a position open that's a step up, right? And they need someone in that role quickly. You are internal. They may have asked around to see who else wants to apply. Maybe you've been tapped for it. They really think you do a great job because you've done really well in your role as an individual contributor. But pulling you into that new role, that's whether you're internal or a new hire. Often workplaces are moving so quickly to get roles filled and get that person in the seat and moving and producing and filling that gap that's likely been left for a while by the last person who had it, that they're not doing a thorough job with mentoring you into the role or
Mm.
preparing you with professional development. And it is it is unfortunate, because it can have the person in that role really almost swimming upstream, you know? So you're trying to learn a new role and you're also trying to learn a new skill alongside, but you're not being mentored well. And so organizations have the responsibility. Mentorship can look like a lot of things. It can look like coaching conversations that help the professional to find like what is the one or two books or the podcast that really would help you to be more informed about this particular skill area that you want to grow. What might be a short course or a certificate program that we can invest in with you to be able to boost your skill in this target area that you want. But we find often that it's after really trying, working through being burned out by something. And I want to use burnout. I don't want to overuse it because sometimes people are just very much overwhelmed and stretched. Right. And so even before burnout, that overwhelm and stretch is a lot, especially if you're doing it on your own. And so it's unfortunate that we wait. Usually it's waiting until things are mission critical. They're not sustainable anymore. That then the professional is saying, hey, they're raising their hand to say, I need support here. And if you're in a good workplace, they will be quick to respond to you. If you're in maybe a chaotic workplace or not very well resourced, they may not respond as quickly as you need. And so that's often where I see the challenge come in is you're already in a challenging moment with your work, and that's when resources are being considered for you. When really organizations have the responsibility to flag that early on and
Mm.
provide and be transparent about the level of support that is available. So, whether that's coaching, mentoring, professional development funds to actually fund you to be able to go out and get some skills and really be able to meet the challenge of the work, organizations play a role.
Oh, so, so, so rich. And I'm so grateful we've had so many of these rich conversations in the past talking about how to advocate for yourself. And so if you haven't already seen, we had a wonderful conversation at the end of last year with Amarelis who talked about how do we advocate for ourselves for these specific types of resources. And then how do we better understand burnout, which I love that you call this into thinking about, so we can acknowledge it and learn about it before we get to that point. And that many of us do, unfortunately, have an experience with either cusping burnout or going through it, and what that can teach us. But something so critical that you're talking about here is the value of practicing. What I hear when you're talking about the organization, which we'll get into, the organization's responsibility to holding this space, it's that when you have that environment, you are allowed to practice and not just have to do it right, but allow yourself to make the errors, to go through, to make the mistakes, because that's natural. We all are going to make mistakes, and in mistakes, we learn. But it's not all the books and all the podcasts. I mean, please, I love these conversations. So I'm glad you're here listening.
Mhm.
All of these are really important, but if they just sit in our mind and they don't actually start to work,
Mhm.
then nothing's going to change. We can read all the things, but we need to also implement them. And so that's why I'm
Mhm.
a big believer in all the PhD. All the masters are so deeply important. Also, lived experience is so important because it allows you to exist in that work. And so that's what we get to practice together, encourage that, and understand. I know a lot of what we're talking about today, why we wanted to have this conversation specifically, is not just leading with this intentionality that we're talking about, with this mindfulness of taking care of ourselves, but also acknowledging how leading through change can
Yeah.
feel really different when you have that uncertainty, when there's so many transitions happening in life and at the organization, because again, that's normal and that it happens a lot. How do you do this? How do you move through this? So I'm really curious from your experience and your perspective of where do you think this role of self-reflection plays in navigating these
Mm.
significant life changes, or how individuals can really prioritize not only themselves, but how to lead with this intentionality?
Mm. So self-reflection is just important to kind of locate yourself, right? Sometimes, especially in times of change. And so, that can be change that's happening at work because, um, maybe the economic landscape is changing. Maybe your org chart has changed. Maybe new strategic initiatives are there. It can be, change can happen for many reasons, right? Maybe you're optimizing something or you're bringing on a new grant or whatever. There can be many reasons for change that happen work wise. And then there's change that can be happening with you personally at home, right? I've worked with, even in this past year, people who they've been hired for executive director roles at the same time that a loved one, a spouse, is diagnosed with cancer.
Mhm.
Life is happening, right? Life is happening. Or a child moves back home, that shifts your home life. If you thought you were an empty nester and now you have, you're working from home and you've got a adult child at home now. There's so many ways that life can be changing for us. And then also our just personal needs may change, the ways we interact with our work. And so the self-reflection doesn't have to be super extensive, but it does give us an opportunity to just check in and say, where am I? Let me locate myself. There's some discomfort or some change that I'm experiencing. Usually we feel it in the body, right? Even if we don't know what it is, we feel it in the body. It may feel like nausea, may feel like discomfort, tightening of the throat when you're at work. It can headache. It can be a number of different things, but there's some indication that something has changed. I'm not sure I like it. And the self-awareness and the self-reflection says, what is happening, right? Let me locate where these changes are and locate what it is that I actually feel about this. What do I feel about this? Because sometimes you'll feel tension and sometimes you'll feel like, oh, this feels uncomfortable. Well, uncomfortable doesn't always mean, oh, I need to quit or oh,
Mm.
I'm ready to leave. Sometimes uncomfortable means, oh, I haven't had a difficult conversation. And
Mm.
that's the root of this discomfort. Oh, I have not been logging off at a good hour. Or after I log off, I just go and like plant myself on the couch with chips. And maybe I need to get out and walk. Why am I using these kind of specific examples? Because first, the self reflection allows us to locate the what, right? What is the issue? And then it allows us to dig a little bit deeper for what sometimes may be very simple resolutions, right? But when we're taking things on as a whole and we know that we're registering discomfort, I didn't like that conversation, I don't really enjoy this work day, I didn't like that board meeting, we can make some kind of broad sweeping conclusions if we don't take that time to self-reflect. And so
Mhm.
self-reflection allows us to operate from a place of just sort of power and authority over our own situations as agents, right? As agents in our own lives, our own situations, and to take some responsibility for how we can have things shift, whether that's having that difficult conversation, or like one colleague, she's like, I just realized after work, I'm working from home, seated in the same room. Yeah, I'm a little worn out from the day. And we're like, okay, so what would help you? Going for a walk with my dog after, right? So work isn't to blame. No one is to blame. She's not to blame, but just a small shift can help to shift the space and shift how you're feeling and be able to really locate what needs to be attended to and what what can just what maybe is not the problem.
Mhm. Oof. So good. This, this reminds me of this conversation around victimhood,
Hmm.
around how, and very much acknowledging there are very wrong things happening in our system. There are very wrong things happening in society. We are feeling it, we are seeing it. You may be affected by it very, very closely. And that is absolutely right to be upset or to be mad or to feel anything that you need to feel. And how that can also exist at the same time as what I love you're saying, owning what we can control within our life.
Mhm.
And what we can control, as we always talk about, is how we choose to perceive this work, how
Mhm.
we choose to perceive and understand, and how we choose to move forward. It's always a choice.
Mhm.
As much as we need to acknowledge everything that's out of our control and these wrongdoings, that is something that no one can ever take away from us, which is our choice. And that
Mhm.
our choice can be grounded in what I love you're talking about, in this self-reflection, in this awareness. I'm curious your thoughts on, what do you think is one of the biggest blocks for people in starting to build that self-awareness to understand these things
Mm.
for people?
Mhm. Yeah. Oh man. I mean, I think you said it right there. It's blind spots.
Mm,
The blocks are blind spots, and we could go through the Johari window, right? And and there's just some things we know we may be challenged in, some areas we have challenges, right? But then there's this spot that's the I don't know that I don't know. And this is where a combination of a few things can be very helpful. I like assessments can be very helpful. They can be personal, private to you, right? It'll give you a chance to see. It may not show you areas of development per se or areas of weakness, but it will show you some of your strengths. It'll give you language for that. It will give you language for how you interact in the workplace. So, for example, like the DISC, is very helpful to see how you react to and communicate out issues, problems, challenges, even galvanizing teams, whatever. It helps you to have that language for where you are. Um, Others like 360 assessments. I mean, you have to take everything, with a bit of a second view and not just wholesale all of the responses, but they can be very helpful to at least contextualize how others are experiencing you. And then coaching can also be a very good support, because sometimes what I find in the coaching space is, even though I'm not in the workspace with you, so I don't see what others are saying about you or how they're experiencing you. But over time, I'm hearing how you're languaging certain experiences. And I can be the objective observer and ask questions that might help you to illuminate and just see where you are, what your role was, what your perspective was, maybe how word choice and language that you use, could have been improved to create more of the environment that you wanted and the outcomes that you wanted. And of course, the coach having in my coaching style is one that I'm bringing in information into the coaching session. So I'm bringing in resources of maybe a podcast episode that might have a little bit of a nugget or a gem to help you, or a chapter of a book or an article somewhere. And so these things can help us to build our self-awareness, and just honestly starting with a little bit of humility. And humility doesn't mean that we need to somehow betray ourselves in what we know, or downplay who we are, our accomplishments, and what we know. But I find that, especially for people who have like more dominant personalities, it can be helpful to just take a breath and listen, right?
mm,
Register what is being said and perhaps what is not being said. And you can ask a follow up question, right? Follow up questions. That one breath allows you to ask a follow-up question, and that may bring in new information into whether it's conflict, or even if it's just trying to collaborate and get things done. It can bring in new information that helps to just move you through the result that you're looking for.
Ooh. And, I love this because it's something I think a lot of us, I'm sure you have so many research that we can share about the value of what to connect with people, connecting with people. And as a leader, as a manager, I like that you brought up humility. I have such a complex relationship with humility, but I like how you're grounding us in this humility from a sense of it's okay. We're going back to it. It's okay that you don't know. It's okay that you show a bit of that softness to others, because when we show more of that vulnerability and share, oh, I'm also figuring it out, I'm not trying to show that I know more than I do, people can humanize you. You can connect to people not on a I am here, you're here, but we're here in this together. And when there's that type of relationship that is built in a workplace, in any place, right? It creates a central understanding, a center of respect, because you know that you can come into it speaking from heart to heart, from mind to mind, from eye to eye, understanding, oh, thank you. I now feel more comfortable showing my own fears, my own my own uncertainties, my own mistakes before things go down a wrong path. Because that's really what we're all trying to do here, right? Our role as coaches is to support you. And so we can think about how do we prepare. We're never going to predict the future. Let me tell you that. That wish is gone. That gift is never going to come. But how we can prepare you in the best way to enter these spaces that can feel a little scary, that the uncertainty that feels so uncertain, they feel unsafe. All right, so what can you do within your control to do that? And when we go into it with this openness, is what I hear you're talking about, this openness to accept there are multiple ways of doing things, there are different perspectives to the situation. How special can that be? And how the fact that that can bring us closer to a deeper connection with someone, or just a more sincere relationship with someone that can benefit how the team as a collective works together.
Yeah, I really appreciate that example, and I'll just push it a little bit further to say, the research shows that a lot of people quit managers, not jobs.
Mm.
Right? When people are leaving workplaces, so this is a retention issue. When they're leaving workplaces, often it's because they've had a really challenging, and I'm using soft language here, right? Very challenging managers and supervisors. And that's what the research bears out, that the person, they liked their job, they were committed to the work, but somehow the people part of it was often challenging. And so your comment, your question about self-awareness is really important, because you know you want to ask yourself, am I that manager? Am I that supervisor? Right? So there's the humility on the side of, as you were speaking about, kind of coming together and the I don't know, but there's also the humility around, how am I showing up? How am
Mm.
I showing up in my workplace? How am I showing up with my team? How am I allowing people to grow? How am I allowing them to do their work in ways that move us forward? How am I interacting with them in these things? And so, I think it's important as a self-awareness tool is to ask, how am I showing up? And if you don't know, ask. Ask trusted
Mhm.
people. Ask trusted people. Likely if they're direct reports, they're not going to give you the real sort of deal about it. But there are places, and there's places where they may be that you can get some insights.
And as I always say, prepare yourself to hear everything. Because how many times have leaders asked for feedback? You're asking of someone to be very vulnerable with you, to share. And then if you don't acknowledge the feedback, nothing changes, move in, then you ask someone to really open themselves up in a moment that's always uncomfortable and scary. And then that for me is, I find that that's where you start losing the trust if then you do
Mhm.
nothing with it, right? So
Mhm.
not only building self-awareness and opening yourself up to listen, but also being able to prepare yourself to take action after.
Yes.
I'm not saying go ahead and change everything about you
Mhm.
with every single comment that you get.
Yeah.
No, because you also, this is again self-awareness. You know
Mhm.
yourself at your core. If someone is saying something that you know is not true to your core, that
Mhm.
may be their perspective of you, and that's their right to have their perspective of you. But if you're hearing that in every single comment, every single conversation, and people you trust and people you're open to, okay, let's take a moment to sit back and really think, oh, even though this is my intention, I
Yeah.
want to come off as a kind person, but I'm coming off as maybe, um, you know, kind, instead, of maybe passive, because you're trying to be kind. Instead, you're actually moving through and ignoring situations because you don't want to be conflicting. Those are very two
Yeah.
different things. You can be a kind person and still be quite strong in your stance, co-create openness, and still support other people from a kindness and an empathetic place. You don't have to ignore everything, or not have difficult conversation. That creates a different type of environment than the intention of kindness, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really critical. And why we're talking about this being so important through change is because this is such a powerful tool to have when change is happening. And it's always happening. Disclaimer, there's always
Yeah.
change.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
always coming back to yourself and knowing how to ask, how to adjust, how to create a bit of awareness with yourself and those around you, which I
Mhm.
think is, a really powerful transition to what we were talking about earlier, which is the organizations. At
Mhm.
large, these organizations have a really big responsibility to be able to hold you, and support you, and work place demands are changing now
Yeah.
more than ever with technology and everything happening in our society, especially for the social sector. So, first of all, I'm curious your thoughts on, as organization leaders, what do you think organization leaders can do to start preparing their workplaces, with this increasing demand and need, that folks are facing right now?
Yeah, it's interesting because, a lot of workplaces will go straight to policies, around work from home. How many days a week do we work? Are we a 4-day work week? Are we a 5-day work week? Are we, do we have sabbaticals? And those are wonderful. I applaud organizations that are truly taking the time to do those structural changes in that way. But I'm going to give you a little insight into one that is so not at that meta level, but very, very important to how people work. I see so much false urgency
Mm,
in the timelines that the professionals I work with are held to.
mm,
Right? So the timelines of producing projects or producing, I'll just say producing and completing projects. Organizations, when you're taking on any, whether it's change or it's adding something new or you're doing an initiative, it is so important to really take a project management view of that work and really look at how much time do we need to get this work done based on the amount of staff that we have, our values around how staff are using their time, around staff capacity, right? Given all the other things that we have going on. So, my request, my call, my suggestion here is actually having a sustainable pace and sort of taking a project management kind of view of how work milestones and deadlines and sort of final projections are set, right? Does everything have to be urgent? Does everything need to happen this quarter? And then there are some things that we have stakeholders, we have timely things that are happening in the news or in your community that need to be addressed. But if everything is urgent, then we don't have room to be flexible and nimble for the things that
Mm,
are actually urgent and emergent. Right.
mhm,
And so one of the things that organizations can do is really look at how they are project managing and the time it takes to complete initiatives or to complete whether new projects or change projects. Look
mm,
at the time based on your people's capacity, what they already have going on that you've asked them to do, your values as an organization. And I'll say on the with this is that sometimes the professionals, the teams, they also have to be willing to let go and deprioritize some activities.
mm,
Sometimes we can get so committed to a work and a project, or this was mine and this was my idea, or I just really love this project. And you may have a supervisor saying, we need to let that go.
mm,
Not because it's personal, not because you couldn't do the work, not because it's no longer important, but we may need to let it go, or we may need to be creative about another time frame in which we get this done because we can't sustainably do this way.
mhm. Oof. So good. And I think it talks to your earlier point about the different skills you need to manage and to do the work.
Mhm.
When
Yeah.
you're in this place of doing, and you're just like, I need to get the deadlines, I need to get the goals, I need to meet the metrics, that's your whole focus. But as a leader, you have the privilege and power to say, actually, this isn't as important as you think it is.
Mhm.
Let me actually, you have to hold that vision, and
Yeah.
you, not only for the organization and your goals, but for your people. If you are seeing this growth happening and everyone's moving so quickly, and you're starting to see people working late and no one's taking vacation, and you're seeing people, you can see exhaustion, you can
Mhm.
see that. Again, building that self-awareness, you can start noticing that. That's where you get to choose to take a step back and
Yeah.
say, espérate, wait.
Mhm.
One
Mhm.
moment, is that project worth or at the detriment of
Yeah.
my entire team?
It's prioritization. And we think we do it, but if you had less resources or if you had less people, you'd have to figure out how to prioritize. So, how can we be more impactful by doing a few things really well
Mm,
and leave a little vacuum, especially in the social sector, right? Leave a little vacuum for things that we have to be responsive to that were not a part of our initial plans. If we're so full,
yes.
if our schedules and our project calendars are so full, you leave no vacuum for flexibility and adaptability. And as sure
Mm,
as we're going to, as sure as you're here tomorrow, something new is going to come that's going to be emergent that requires a bit of response from your team, your people, yourself.
mm. So important. So I'm curious, let's go into adaptability. So important. That's what we're talking about here. So what do you think people can do to cultivate this mindset that embraces
Mm.
adaptability, that embraces this evolving nature of openness that we're talking about?
Oh man, I wish I could point to some literature or research, and of course there's stuff there, but I will tell you, for me, what makes and really helps with adaptability is a solid core in who I am,
Mm,
my values, what is important to me, not making the work more important than me,
mm,
right? And for me, it's going to a spiritual place of worthiness. Because what happens, we get challenged when there's a lot of pressure, right? We can be challenged to prove ourselves, we can be challenged to do more, we can be challenged to overcommit, overpromise. There's so many things that we do when we're challenged through change. And so we can also take on like this idea that some maybe the change has happened because something is we've done wrong, or maybe we didn't see ahead enough, right? Especially for leaders who are trying to chart a course, navigate a way. Oh gosh, I should have seen that. I should have gotten ahead of that. Or, there's so many things we can do that start to layer on burden onto ourselves. And so while there are many tools and techniques and tactics, I will say some of this comes from your own personal grounding.
Mm.
Trusting yourself in the ways that you come to what you do, and then supporting yourself, truly supporting yourself, um, and not second guessing yourself, your intentions, your skill, your ability, even
Ah.
as you're growing, right? Even as you're growing. Yeah, it'll help you move through change without carrying it so heavy. I
Mm.
have a friend who told me this, that sometimes he would do this exercise with himself. Like if he's in a challenge with work, he's a CEO of a company, he might kind of visualize himself sitting in a room. So he's actually sitting now watching himself from different positions in the room. Okay, I'm going to sit in
Mm.
the corner over there in the chair. I'm going to stand up, or I'm going to be in the ceiling and I'm looking down at you. Many ways to allow you to look at yourself and the situation that you're in so you can see from different perspectives and not just the one that's right in front of you. You
Mm.
might actually see that some situations that look like challenge are opportunities. Right? You might see that maybe the challenge is not as big as you thought, or the root of it is not where you thought. No, it's not with the employee or the direct report who didn't get that report in on time. It's because you don't have a good project management system where your team is able to communicate when things are due, when they're ready, and hand them off, right? You all are working in email and you should be in maybe some kind of tool that gives more visibility for your work. Using that as a small example to say sometimes just being able to ground in ourselves
Mm.
allows us to move through change, and then to also sort of diagnose, if you will, and I'm using that in quotes, but diagnose the root of some of the issues that we're facing.
Mm. Oof, yes. So, 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 so important. I love this exercise of placing yourself in other
Mhm.
places keeps going back to this self-awareness. And I want to acknowledge something that you said that I use a lot with my clients. So if this, you may have heard this if you've listened before on these conversations, but I'll say this again: the language, the importance of the language that we use.
Mhm.
Anytime I hear someone, even myself, this is a technique my therapist taught me many, many moons ago. And it completely changed my life, of the should.
Yeah.
Anytime you use should, think, pause for 5 seconds. Where's that should coming from? Because
Mhm.
I guarantee you 98 or 99.9 of the times that should is not coming from us. It's
Mhm.
not coming from a realistic place of where what we value, what we care about, but it's coming from external forces, external family expectation, work expectation, unrealistic expectation. I should be working 24 hours. No, you shouldn't. I should be here every night because that's going to prove. No, that's not going to prove anything. That's not going to prove you're a better leader, right? And so that is also such a small technique. I don't use the word should. Anytime I see myself start using should, I'm like, "Ooh, hold on. Where's that coming from, Manuela?" So such a small practice of this, shifting perspectives, like you're calling us in to do, thinking of even the wording that we use. When we use that word, that already is opening up a whole. It's coming from where is it coming from? Is it coming from you, or is it coming from someone else? And then what? You have the choice to say, do I want to function from someone else's perspective and desires and expectations of me, or do I want to function from my own perspective, values, expectations of me? This grounding is so, 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 so critical. Oh, Well, I am so sad. I can't believe we're almost at time because I knew this was going to happen. We just have so much richness to share and so many
Yes.
connections. So I appreciate you grounding us in so much of this awareness, like calling us into this awareness as being one of your biggest tools to navigate all these changes. I have one final question for you that I
Let's
ask
hear it.
every single one of our guests before we, which it goes very well to what you were just sharing. So I'm excited. Pero living a life con
Mm.
fuerza is about reclaiming our inner power to live in alignment with our values. So I want to hear from you. How are you choosing to live a life con fuerza? Or what is living a life con fuerza, which in Spanish, you know this, means
Mhm.
what strength mean to you?
Yeah, at this stage and season of my life with my own, life transitions, work transitions, strength is actually about seeking support. That's from friends, it's from family. It is allowing myself to be more vulnerable about the things that I don't know or that I need help with. And trusting that people have the capacity to walk with me, the capacity to support me, or the capacity to even say, to set a boundary if they need to. Right. And so
Yes.
for me, actually, strength has looked a lot like giving up some
Mm.
responsibility, moving that off of me, taking lightening my load, lightening the burden. And it's actually helped me to have more authentic connection in my relationships. Ones that I would have said, these relationships are already so deep already, they're already so nurturing, but I didn't realize that there were still things I was carrying on my shoulders, questions that I have about things I want to do in my business, things I'd like to do in my personal life, and where I'm uncertain. Being able to be strong has meant not relying on my own strength, but looking to the strength of others and looking to the love and care of others to be able to actually meet the things in life that I want to do or that I am confronted with.
Ah, so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. And everything you're worthy of. You've worked so
Mm.
hard. You have you're worthy of receiving all of this. And thank
Mm.
you so much for sharing such a beautiful alignment to your journey. And hopefully that can inspire all of us, inspire me. It definitely inspires me to what that means, letting go to be able to receive is what I hear.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. So before we hop off, y'all, I just like to share a bit of announcements coming from Confuerza. I'm so excited. We're going to have another rich conversation on the 28th. I'll be in New Orleans at the Peak Conference. So if you're at Peak Conference, please visit Dr. Fatima and I as we connect to this, as we continue this conversation. At Peak, you'll also have opportunity to coach with both of us. Their incredible Peak Grant Making is offering laser coaching sessions, and it is free. So you get a free 45-minute session with each of us with how special that is. So that will be available throughout the entire conference if you want to come and connect with us. I also have a workshop during the conference on burnout and how to navigate burnout during with a wonderful colleague, Nicole, who you might have met last week if you joined. And the last thing I'll share, I am receiving clients for my signature workshops and trainings. And we touch on a lot of these. I have workshops available for small communities, organizations, or either conferences as well that touch on a lot of the topics we talked about today, actually. How to lead from your values, how to connect to intuitive leadership. We talked about this right at the end, which is intuitive leadership is all about understanding yourself. The data and all of this is really important. But if you don't trust yourself, that confidence really disconnects from all the data and work that we have. So I have a bunch of workshops on that. If you're interested, as you're getting into the season of action and doing for the spring, summer, and fall, would love to come in and support you and your team in cultivating that deeper connection with yourself and your team members. Is there anything that we can support you in before we hop off? Any offerings or events that you have coming up that we can highlight?
Well, I am definitely looking forward to being at the Peak Summit in New Orleans. And so I look forward to connecting with people there. But I'll also say I have a masterclass, a free masterclass that's available. It really is designed, the Breakthrough and Clarity Masterclass. If you're feeling a little bit like what's next in life and career, and you want to make some shifts or some changes, or you're just trying to figure out where you are to locate yourself, my free Breakthrough and Clarity Masterclass is at professionalpathways.co/peak. Professionalpathways.co/peak. And it's all yours for free.
Amazing. Wow, what an honor. Thank you so much for having that resource available. As always, y'all, go to our leadership and well-being resource library that we link. It's in the comments section here on LinkedIn and in YouTube. And so you can go, and all of these resources are attached to that resource page for this conversation. I'll see y'all in 2 weeks, where we get to sit down with Rosalie, who is a new Latina author, and she built wrote a whole book on how to build a beautiful business con confianza. She's a risk expert, so she shares with us how to befriend risk. Risk is everywhere in our life. How we continue to befriend risk so we can take the steps even when it's scary. So I'm excited to connect with Rosalie. I'll see y'all here in 2 weeks. Have a beautiful Wednesday. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Fatima, again for being
Thank
here.
you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Alrighty.